My name is Dan Sullivan. I am the Language Arts Lab Coordinator here at Grand Rapids Community College. And before you sits a panel of individuals who have very diverse experiences and perspectives about writing. And so what we hope to do today is give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of those experiences and perspectives. We've settled on roughly three topics that we're going to try to talk about today. We're going to talk about student growth and improvement as writers. We're going to talk a little bit about writing that takes place outside of the classroom, real world writing. And to kick things off, we're going to talk a little bit about how we relate to writing in a personal way, what writing has done for us personally, how we connect to it, things like that. And so they're going to do the majority of the talking today. I'm going to throw out some questions here and there, but they're the real experts to learn from. And so what I'd ask our panelists to do, just one at a time, to introduce yourselves, anything that you care to share about who you are, educational background, professional experiences, just so your audience has a chance to get to know you a little bit. And then the one kind of question that I'd like to fold into your introduction is maybe to talk a little bit about what writing means to you. How do you connect to writing? Why is writing important? Maybe why writing is difficult, just something personal about writing and your relationship to it. So why don't we start with you, Elena?
Okay, my name is Elena Plews. I am actually a music major here at GRCC, voice primary. And I came to the Language Arts Lab through my English 102 class. I had a real interest in revision and furthering my writing abilities and also helping other people do so. I really enjoy helping people find their voice. Which is a big reason why I love writing so much. I've never really been like an especially gregarious person, so writing for me has given me a sense of agency, meaning it gives me the time I need to really communicate what I want to say. It empowers me that way, and it's sort of like a puzzle for me. I find like the best way to communicate something as concisely and interestingly as possible. So yeah, is there anything else you wanted me to mention?
That's good for starters,
All
I
right.
think. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellie Simpson, and I just got my bachelor degree in integrated studies, and I received a technical writing certificate. That's where I find my passion, is technical writing, which can be anywhere from editing a medical book to writing work instructions. I've worked in the lab since 2012, and I really like to empower people also to be able to have their voice and their say in things. That's why I like tutoring. And because to me, writing is communicating my ideas in a better way. That's about it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Ron. I am in my second semester now as a professional tutor in the writing lab. I graduated a few years ago with a bachelor's in English with a minor in linguistics. So, writing is something I've done a lot and that I've struggled with over the years. In high school, it was always something I did well in. In college, I struggled more with it, so it was kind of frustrating. But just like my fellow panelists have already said, writing is a way for me to communicate what I want to say. When I'm speaking, whatever comes out is basically what you guys are all going to hear. When I'm writing, I have a chance to put it on paper. I see it first. I can edit it again, and then I can send it out. So that's why I really enjoy writing, because I feel like I have more control over it. And then also, one more thing I wanted to mention that I'll probably be talking about a little bit today is that I spent a couple years teaching English as a second language classes. So that's also a source of teaching writing.
All right, my name is Anna Reynolds, and I'm probably the youngest person on this panel. I am still a student here as well. I'm currently studying history and secondary education. I came to the lab through education, actually, through my education classes. I was encouraged to become a tutor And then I found a passion in the lab, and I was originally drawn to it as a community of writers and readers and thinkers. And I think for me, that's what's always been most important about writing is the ability to create a community around what you're writing about. Being a history student, I obviously, the majority of my writing involves like research papers and things like that. So it's interesting to kind of see other people's perspectives and create conversation through writing. And I think that's as far as I want to go now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Korn, and I'm actually a business administration major. So a lot of my writing and writing experience is very communicative and functional. A lot of it comes from simply having to, but at the same time I enjoy it because like Emily said, it does give you a chance to kind of put an idea down, get something out there and think about it, revise it, figure out how it is you really want to ask something, request for something, or even convey some information. And so I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about writing compared to simply verbal communication.
Hi, everybody. I'm Max Spencer. I'm the Biology Learning Center lab coordinator, so I'm kind of the odd person out here. I'm not part of the writing lab, but my background is primarily scientific writing, so heavy on the communication, especially abstract ideas as well as data. Writing is just an incredible tool in my perspective. Yeah, it's kind of like water. It can fit so many different containers. You can use it artistically or technically, and I think that's part of the beauty of it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for those wonderful introductions. Just so we have a chance to get through as many of these questions as possible to the panelists, don't feel that compelled to answer every single one. I mean, if that's how it turns out, that's wonderful. But just when you have something to say, just grab a mic and we'll get this thing moving forward. So the first question has to do with the types of writing that you find yourselves doing now, either in school or in the workplace. If a few of you could just kind of talk about how writing is a part of your day-to-day life. Again, the types of writing you do, maybe some of the challenges that are inherent to that everyday writing. I think that'd be very interesting to hear about.
I could share. So in my job, I'm currently working as a legal assistant, and writing is a part of my job every single day. And it ranges quite a bit from how I have to write and what I have to write. Things that are informal all the way up to very formal requests. So, you know, motions that go into court and writing things where the attorney looks it over and signs it, but I'm making sure that it's accurate, that it's exactly what needs to be done to get the documents and reports that we need. But then I'm also writing memos and emails. I think one of the hardest parts is when we have a client call in, they have an issue going on, and sometimes it turns into a 30 or 45-minute discussion that I have to bring down to a half page or a page because the attorney just doesn't have time to read a 3 or 4 page memo. So finding the information, really getting down to it, summarizing and getting out what is really important from what was conveyed to me is a big part of my everyday writing.
Great, thank you, Matt. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Okay. Currently, I also, in the lab, besides tutoring, I write instructions for my fellow tutors for different jobs that we do. And I also, on a part-time basis, sometimes work for Dean Hoxie here at GRCC, and I look at financial aid letters and different things that go out for athletics, and I alter them so that you have the people who understand the financial aid process, and then you have the people who don't, and trying to find something that the person who is receiving the letter understands in plainer language and much more simple, and not have like have to have a technical degree to read it, and I enjoy that. So.
Anna?
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting is that both Matt and Ellie offered ways that we write to help inform others or help to communicate better. But I think writing, for me, it helps me communicate with myself, if that's a way I can make sense of that. One of the things that we were joking about as panelists was that each one of us, with the exception of Max, I'm not sure. Again, sorry, you're the odd one out. But we were all
He's
joking.
not that odd. But.
No, he's not. But we had all, in some way, shape, or form, written out our ideas to these questions, whether it's in the form of a free write or even just responding to each question point by point. And I think the writing process in particular for me, it's always very beneficial, like what Emily and Elena had said earlier, where to help me clarify my own thoughts before I go out to speak or present on something. Writing as a way of communicating with oneself, I think, is really important. And I think I've learned that more so in college than I have in any other experience.
Very nice, thank you. I guess we'll move on to the next question. It's kind of similar to this. This one asks you to kind of drill down a little bit and think of an example. But to the audience, I would just like to mention that I'm sure those of you who are in English classes right now or have taken them recently, one of the things that your professors are probably talking to you about is just how vital a skill writing is to develop. And some of us that might be on the younger side or maybe don't have jobs yet might not quite see that connection between what you're doing in the classroom as writers and how it can apply to real-world settings. So what I thought I'd ask the panel, if you can think of an example of a time when writing really helped you achieve something, either personally or professionally. Maybe it helped you with a job interview or a particular project or a job itself. And maybe even thinking about how, in the sense that the manner that you used writing, maybe there was no real substitute for it. Like you had to use writing to do this, to achieve this particular thing. And if anyone can think of a time or an example, that would be great.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind for me is all of my scholarships and all of the relationships I've sort of created with my professors here and elsewhere have started with writing. And they, either through the scholarship to the next step, that's how it started, was I had to write an essay or I had to introduce myself, make a personal statement. Most of my jobs require writing. I mean, everybody should have a good resume. Sort of everything that I have right now and everything that I'm doing relates to writing, and it comes from me writing something. That's usually the first step. So that's sort of immediately what came to my mind.
Great, thank you.
My point was going to be somewhat similar. I applied to graduate school recently, and even though that's, far in the future for some people, while that might be a little far off for some people, or maybe you're never going to go to graduate school, it doesn't matter because it's the same set of skills for any job application I've ever had. I've had to write a personal statement, and a lot of times that's their first impression going forward with anybody, regardless of what the job is. And a lot of times if the writing isn't solid, they're going to throw that application out regardless of how strong of an applicant you are.
Yeah, going off of that in terms of applying for things, I had a job interview, my most recent job. I was in the interview process. I completed the first interview, and I think what I think of, and probably what most people think of when you're interviewing for a job, is you write your resume, you write your cover letter, and then you're done with the writing. Then you can just speak, and if you're great at speaking to people, then you're golden. So I finished the first interview. I found out there was going to be a second interview, so I went home, and between those two interviews, I got an email. And in the email, I got a list of questions that I had to answer in a written format. And it was things like, how would you handle a difficult coworker, or how would you handle this or that? And it was meant to test my writing abilities. Even though I wasn't going to be asked to craft essays or anything like that in this job, it was still an important enough skill that I was asked to be able to come up with ideas, but also to be able to communicate them clearly through writing. So that one was a little bit of a surprise, but I think I got the job, so it turned out okay.
Well, maybe now is a good time to sort of segue into talking about student growth and development. And everyone on the panel here, although they work in somewhat different capacities with students, they're all familiar with student writing and what student growth and improvement might look like. And so I guess the first question I'd pose to you guys is, what does growth as a writer mean? Or what does growth as maybe a college student writer mean to you guys? And what do you think, what can students do to move forward, to grow and improve? And if you want to think about it in terms of the types of writers and writing that you work with, or think about it maybe in terms of your own educational or professional background, that would be fine. But just kind of talking about growth and improvement, what we can do to help students get from here to here.
I'd say for me, clarity and just economy of words has been kind of the biggest area of growth. I think at one point I thought that, increasing vocabulary and having this just rich sense of communicating things was kind of the ultimate goal. But then I was finding the message would get lost sometimes if you're not very accurate with it, if you're not very precise with it. And, I may have had a 4 or 5 page essay that said nothing, where I've had 1 or 2 page essays that have had so much more content and so much more depth of idea in there. And I think that's probably been the biggest area of growth. And I think that's something that's hardest to get to, because we see a lot of publications with just wonderful flowery language and we want to write that same way. But if the message isn't clear, it's just filler.
And Matt, just a follow-up question, do you find that that's good advice for writers across the board, or is that more particular to the fields of legal writing and business writing, or
I think
something else?
Yeah, I think it's good advice across the board. We're a pretty impatient society, and we tend to scan and skim things more than we really want to read things in depth. And so if you're communicating with somebody and they see just this big wall of text, whether it's an email or it is a text or anything like that, we gloss over it. And so sometimes you may have a great message in the midst of there, but it could get completely overlooked if there's just too much around there that's not adding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I can really attest to the importance of being able to get to information quickly. When I was teaching, I was creating lesson plans that I was using, but that other instructors would be using as well. We were all sharing lesson plans. So it's something that in my class I had to be able to look down at my notes and very quickly find where I am in this lesson, what do I need to do for this activity. But it also, beyond being notes for myself, it also had to be something that someone else could understand and interpret very quickly, that just at a moment's glance they needed to be able to find the message. So I think it is something that's really important in a variety of fields, that the message, even if it's more than just a bullet point, but that it's still easy to find and that that's really what stands out.
Very nice.
From a science writing standpoint, too, a really important thing, and I think the other people who do technical writing can attest to this, is learning the lingo, because within every discipline there are very specific phrases or terms that are necessary to communicate effectively with other people in that discipline. And one of the best ways to do that, to learn those lingo, or learn that lingo, is to just read. I mean, read within the field that you're planning on going into, and learning how to communicate effectively.
I think that was an excellent point. This is going off of that first, and then I do have another point to make. I think that reading is probably one of the most important aspects of writing to me, and I think maybe like in writing at large. The more you read, the better writer you'll be, because you're exposing yourself to the words of other people, the ideas of other people. So I think for me as a writer, the most growth that I've experienced has come through reading other students' work in the lab, getting the opportunity to do the peer review experience, but then also, like Max said, reading works within your field. I said earlier that I'm a history major, so I do have a tendency to read a lot of kind of obscure historical books and facts and things like that. but through that, you develop a passion. And this is the point I had wanted to make about growth and working with students. I think the biggest thing or most important thing that I would encourage students to do is to just practice writing more, because it's all about confidence. When you are a confident writer, you are a clear and focused writer.
Continue.
Okay, sorry.
I just didn't want Elena to feel left out there.
But I think the more you write and the more you practice, the more confident you get, and you can start to develop those other skills that come later on. But I think first and foremost, it is about actually sitting down and getting to it.
So kind of piggybacking off of both of those things, yeah, definitely in each of our fields there's like significantly different lingo, and it's all very specific, and sometimes it can be really abstract. I know, like, as a music major, there's plenty of music appreciators out there, but not everybody is going to know like all the lingo used within music theory. And as I'm interested in musicology, which sort of encompasses music history and sociology. And with that needs to come the ability to communicate with many different kinds of audiences. So maybe you're writing to maybe your audience is academic, maybe you're writing for your professors or colleagues. But then sometimes a lot of musicologists write for journals or magazines or for radio. And the point is to sort of use language that you can communicate with that larger audience with. And for me, like, that's sort of my biggest bugaboo with music in academics, is that sometimes we're making a lot of the writings a little inaccessible to music appreciators who aren't music majors. And I think it's so important to keep that in mind. And I know probably with history and science and everything else, like you have to be able to sort of switch languages, switch codes between speaking with an audience who is educated and speaking to an audience who just either really enjoys music or enjoys scientific pursuits or is kind of interested in law or history. So that for me has been the biggest learning curve, is A, learning the lingo within my field, and B, learning how to communicate it to people who do not major in that field, because that's going to be really important in any sort of undertaking. So.
I just wanted to comment on the point that Elena made about that code switching. And in a lot of fields, that does become very important. In the legal world, I sometimes am writing things that are going to judges, that are going to other attorneys. But then I'm also writing things that are going to clients and people who know nothing about the legal world. And I'm giving the same information in both instances, but the way I'm delivering it is vastly different. There are times where legal documents come into somebody and they say, I have no idea what this says or what this means for me. And I have to take that and almost translate it and tell people, oh, well, this is what it means for your situation. Now you can do this, or you have to do this, or that type of thing. And then I have to go back to, the judges and the attorneys and make sure it's in that language that they're looking for.
I guess I have a question to ask my fellow panelists, in that those of you that discussed specifically the idea of code switching or working within the jargon of your field, and getting to those stages in your writing, I guess I would wonder how we as students, or even just writers at large, would go about achieving that. How would you develop that skill?
Great question.
Okay, so for me, I'm speaking from the point of view of the arts, like music and stuff like that. You can't really, you could, I guess some people might, but look at a picture or listen to a song without feeling something. It's going to evoke something inside of you. And a lot of times that's what magazines focus on. They focus on sort of the first reaction, something visceral that people experience. And so for me, when I'm relating it to someone else, I might ask them what they already know. That's usually my first step, is is, oh, so you're familiar with this. Okay, so when you talk about that song that moved you and you're talking about that specific part, this is why you felt this way, or this is why it moved you that way. And I explain it in simpler terms without using the vocabulary specific to music theory. So that for me specifically is how I do it.
I think a good way to do that too is in peer editing and peer revision. You know, get it out to an audience before it's final. Ask people, you know, what do you understand here? What are you missing? What's not clear? Because we're all coming from a different benchmark as far as any of that vocabulary goes. And having somebody else's eyes on there, you might think, oh, this is perfectly clear and completely understandable, and everybody should know what that means. But someone may look at it and say, I don't know what you're talking about here. And it's important to get that feedback and bounce off each other.
And I also think that it's all understanding the audience and the purpose. You have to think about, why am I writing this? What's the end goal? And like I said, knowing your audience is really important, because like Matt said, if you're writing for an instructor, that's going to be different than if you're in a group, say Comic-Con, and you're writing a blog towards other people that are into the same thing. So it's just a matter of being able to think about who you're writing to, what level of education maybe, what level of interest in what you're writing about, just really thinking about the purpose and the audience, for me.
Yeah, Anna, before you jump in, I'd like to stick with this just for a second. I think this is a great topic that's come up. If others would like to weigh in on how they do, audience analyses, figuring out who you're writing to and what you need to say, I think that'd be really interesting if others would like to chime in.
Yeah, I was gonna. I had a follow-up question in a similar vein to that, but I think for me, and as a way to kind of understand my audience, I think you have to first be comfortable with what you're talking about. Be comfortable yourself with the topic, and then once you've got a really firm foundation in what you want to share, the story you want to tell, the information you want to relay, that's when you can then go about, how do I write this? So you have to first figure out what you want to say, and then you can go about the how. And I think to think about it in two separate steps like that, for me as a writer, has always been helpful.
Can you tease that connection out a little bit more? Because I think that's a really interesting point. First, understanding it yourself, and then extrapolating to others. And if you can think of an example, or even give us some insight on your thought processes, that would be really interesting.
Okay, I can think of it in two ways. So one is a little bit more straightforward. It's I think of it in terms of like research papers or those like analytical type writing. So when you get into that, you have to have that really firm foundation in your research and understanding the topic. You don't want to have just done the like quick glance over Wikipedia and then think that you can go right in and write your topic. You want to be really entrenched in all of the information around there, and be really like steadfast in your argument. And I think part of that comes from like confidence in yourself as a writer, which from personal experience can be difficult. And then the second way to kind of look at it, in familiarizing yourself with the story too, is in like personal writing. And I think that comes through, for me, it's always come through drafts. The more I write out a story or write out an account of something that I've experienced, the more I write it out, the more clear it becomes, and the more I start to understand the event or the people involved, those kinds of things. And that's how I would go about creating that foundation of the how before I start to move on to figure out the audience.
Very nice, thank you. Anyone else on audience or purpose? Should we move on here? Okay, sort of last question before we talk about kind of some nuts and bolts stuff about writing in the real world. I'd ask the panelists to kind of envision themselves back to when you were, I guess you could say, less experienced or less confident writers. I mean, I know even experienced writers have confidence issues, so maybe that's not the best term for it. But thinking back to a time when you didn't have a lot of either of those things, And now here you are as experienced, adept writers. What are some of the things, or maybe even just one thing, that you wish that you knew then that you know now? So you talk to your younger, not quite as skilled writerly self, and what sort of maybe advice would you give him or her, or something that you wish that you knew then? It's kind of a thought experiment here.
I think one of the most important things to consider for myself when I was still starting out with writing, and for anyone that's starting out with writing, is that it takes time to become more confident in your writing. It takes time to learn some of these skills that we're talking about. Just because you're not perfect the first time you try it doesn't mean that you're not cut out for it. A personal example, I know when I was very young in elementary school, I used to love to write stories, just creative stories that probably no one else found funny except me. And I had a great time with it. But then once I got a little bit older, into high school, into college, I just decided that no one else would like this. Why am I doing this? I can't write creative stories. So I stopped trying. I avoided the classes because I thought, I'm not good at that kind of writing. I can do the factual analyses of text, but I can't think of anything interesting that someone would want to read. So I stayed away from it, and I kind of had trouble developing those skills. And then later on in a job, we were asked to, in our monthly reports every month, we had to think of an interesting story that happened that month, and we had to write about it in a creative way because it was meant to advertise the programs that we were participating in. And at that point, I realized, wait a second, I haven't been developing these skills, and now I have to use them, and it's not as easy as it should be. So I would say don't shy away from trying something new just because it's not easy the first time you do it. It's going to take time, and it's going to take some effort, but it's always possible.
I think the advice I'd give to my younger self is going to sound overly...
Let's limit it to writing, Matt.
Okay, I can do that a lot quicker. It seems overly simplistic, but it's really just write. The biggest issue I had was it wasn't always the way that I wanted to express myself, and so I just wouldn't do it. I skipped it, and there wasn't that opportunity, like Emily was talking about, for growth and development because I just wasn't practicing it. I wasn't, trying it at all. And the other thing too is, take the feedback. Don't look at a bad grade as necessarily a failure, but, an opportunity to really look in and get those suggestions and learn from them and build on that, because you don't always know where your gaps are. But people who are more experienced and more knowledgeable can definitely see that, and you can learn from that.
Very nice, thank you.
Sort of going along with that, something that I learned, well, first of all, I should say, if you don't use it, you lose it, like anything else. For me, my college experience hasn't been linear. So there was a period of time where I was just working and I wasn't in school. And when I came back, I was definitely rusty. And there was definitely a couple of times where I kind of got a couple grades and I was like, this isn't what used to happen in high school. I was the A student. And so I definitely you have to get back in shape. So keep writing. If you're not in a writing class, find a way to write. Even if it's just to yourself, even if it's just a story. And going along with that, every professor is going to be different. Every writing professor is going to be sometimes vastly different. And there is a certain level of subjectivity that comes with writing. So every professor is going to be looking at different aspects of your writing. So something that might get like an A- from one professor might get a B- from another, because there's certain things that they prioritize. And the more writing professors you have, the better you're going to be, because you're going to be getting all this different kinds of feedback. And I would encourage you to go to your peers as well, because again, subjectivity, people are going to prioritize things different, and you're going to get a lot of different feedback to choose from. And then that's where it's empowering for you, because you get to choose what you want to change and what you want to keep.
One thing I'd probably tell a younger writer, myself as a younger writer, would be to not be afraid of drafts. I mean, I used to always try to make the perfect paper the first time out the gate, and it just doesn't work that way. Writing is a process. It's a never-ending process. There's a point where you do have to call it, but I went through the peer review process recently with a paper, and I had to write 10 drafts of a paper, and sometimes that's okay. I mean, there's not always the perfect way to say a phrase, and you just gotta keep going.
I would tell my younger self to be more gentle, not judge myself, because when I wrote, when I came to college, I was non-traditional learner, and I thought I should be able to write a paper, 1-2 drafts, and that didn't happen. And I used the lab a lot, and I definitely have learned through my writing now that it doesn't matter. I see people with a bachelor level, masters, they still get help. They still need help with their writing. So it's a long process. Different aspects maybe, but people are always going to get help with or need help with their paper. And it's just being patient with yourself and taking the feedback, I think.
Just to add one more thing onto all these wonderful suggestions, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, or I wish I would have learned earlier, is that writing is a learned skill. I think a lot of times we look at like really great writers or these prolific people who write wonderful books or things like that, and we're like, oh, they were just born that way. Like they just write so well, they must just be like that all the time. But I think especially when I was younger, I thought that, some people lucked into being good writers. But I think keeping in your mind that this is a skill that anyone can do, that would include myself and you, that you can work towards a goal. Good writers can be born, but great writers are made.
Thank you, and I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Very eloquent final comment there from Anna. We are just about out of time. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that we gave our audience here an opportunity for a couple of questions. So does anyone have a question for the panel at large or a particular panelist by chance? No? What's that?
You broke the rule. You're not supposed to ask them questions.
Sorry. Well, why don't we give them a round of applause today? Thank you very much.